let's get to a little thing that happened today in Canberra, which is not a little thing at all. Now, no one's broken a law here, but Julie Bishop, who went from being the deputy leader of the Liberal Party, being at the absolute nucleus of the government for much of its 6 years, now says that now is the time that we need to change the rules to make sure that ministers can't be lobbied by, among others, former ministers. All of this because she and Christopher Pyne are being investigated by the Senate after they picked up jobs that may well, it had helped to know some information about how government works, particularly this government. They, of course, say nothing to see here, but they gave evidence today to a parliamentary inquiry. Now, normally when you give evidence to a parliamentary inquiry and you're on a taxpayer-funded pension for the rest of your life, you would actually turn up in person. But no, they did it on the phone. And here's what Julie Bishop had to say.
My submission makes a suggestion as to how the ministerial standards could be amended, placing the onus on current serving ministers and officials to not hold business meetings or be lobbied by former ministers would strengthen the operation of the standards and improve accountability to the Parliament.
Nicholas, so when she was a minister and could change the rules, nothing. Now that she is somebody who is maybe potentially on the wrong side of a shadow of one of these rules, but again, no illegality here, just the incredible oddity of being able to move straight from government to an area that needs to do a lot of business with government. I mean, she's taking the proverbial, isn't she?
Oh, look, I mean, again, there's a long line of politicians. There is a long line of politicians who have a different view of the world once they're no longer in politics, and it's easy to take the piss out of them when they do that and say, oh, well, you didn't do anything about when you had the opportunity. But it is also true that when you're actually in office, you are subject... I'm not trying to defend her, actually, but you're subject to day-to-day practicalities and compromises you have to make, which you are relieved of once you're no longer in the game. But I think the biggest story out of today was Christopher Pyne. I mean, you know... The guy, as it turns out, you know, he was dealing directly with Ernst & Young about what his next job was going to be when he left politics. He was the Defence Minister at the time, and he's talking with the defence industry partner at the firm. Meanwhile, of course, there's provisions, the guidelines for federal police requires them for not lobbying in the area, lobbying government in a particular area for 18 months after they leave, and also bans them from using information that they gained as a minister as a result of their position to their benefit afterwards. But there he is talking as a defence minister to Ernst & Young about how he could go into the defence practice of that firm. Like, it's just as far as I can tell, it seems like a straight-out breach of the rules.
Yeah, but also, I mean, James, the other thing that's worth explaining to people that are watching us who don't quite care how the sausage is made to this level of degree, but it is worth pointing out as to why this issue matters, which is quite obviously, if you've been a minister for some time, it's not just you as minister, but you get to pick your staff, and then after you've been around for long enough, you get to put people in a department over here, a position over there, a board over here. So your tentacles of awareness, let's put it that way, rather than influence, becomes quite significant. And, for example, Christopher Pyne was very good at this particular thing when it came to defence, either appropriation or then actually as a defence minister. Clearly, Julie Bishop, being both Shadow Foreign Affairs and then Foreign Affairs Minister for the entirety of her time there, she's able to do the same. That's what these companies are buying, aren't they, in part? And again, it's not illegal, but it's just that's why there should be a little pause between when you were the minister versus when you get to ring some people you know when you were the minister.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely, 100%. And I mean, it's unseemly. The fact of the matter is, though, there is the grey line between what's confidential and unconfidential information. There's no exist. You know what people are like. You know how to approach them. You know the way they think. It's an enormous help having this. But the thing we've got to face is we're going to have a lot more of this, because one of the reasons we're going to have a lot more of it is because we got rid of the pension. These people are going to people are going to leave Parliament now, and they're going to be trying to make a dime immediately out of their former contacts. I mean, both Bishop and Pyne have got pensions, so there's no excuse for them. I actually think their pension should be suspended while they are doing this. If they're going to go back as lobbyists, they shouldn't also be living on a taxpayer stipend. which they didn't contribute to, or they didn't contribute anything
do.
like what they're getting
They
paid.
do.
Well, they do. No, but they don't get. They do contribute.
11.5%.
No. Yes, but they don't. Let me finish the point. They don't contribute anything like what they get back. If you got a return that anyone else got, we'd all be very comfortably retired.
That's not entirely true, because they pay. Whereas people on the new sort of
Bit of a shock. Here comes the
new
shop
sort of
steward.
superannuation don't pay any tax. People on the old scheme do pay tax.
Sure.
It's a big difference.
But just in case
that's
viewers
not
at
the point.
home are...
That's not the
let's
point.
get back to where people are
The important
tonight.
point here is this is a very unusual Senate inquiry, and it's not going to go anywhere anyway. And I thought they handled themselves pretty well. But the important thing is this. Whoever looked at former Prime Ministers, how come Labor former Prime Ministers get rich and Coalition or Liberal Prime Ministers, with the exception of Malcolm Turnbull, don't? When Menzies left office, he didn't even own a house. The community got together and bought him one. But we look at the wealth of Bob Hawke that has come from the just the auction of items, the value of the house, $14 million. You don't get that off a parliamentary salary. So nobody asked the
150
question.
trips to China.
So hang on, I mean, that was
Where did they go after that? Who did they talk to? Prime ministers have great knowledge. Julia Gillard gave money to the Clinton Foundation and set up this educational body,
Sure.
which he then went over and headed it.
No, and I'm not suggesting that that's not the case, but Julie Bishop today turns around and says, I've got a few suggestions about how you can improve the system. Funnily enough, when I was in a position to do it, I did none of them. That's my point, is that
I mean, Bronwyn's making blindingly partisan observations here. You know,
Fancy
everything
that,
that Liberals
you
ever
never
did
do.
was wonderful, and everything Labor does is awful. I mean, you say that, you know, the community chipped in to buy Bob Menzies a house after he'd finished. It was the captains of the industry in Melbourne. The big businessmen of Melbourne put money into buying
a very modest
It was a very modest house in Canberra Avenue as well.
In a very nice suburb.
very
But let's go
modest
back to
house.
James's point, because that's right. Because I can understand there might be some people at home looking at Christopher Pyne and saying, well, is there anything so wrong about trying to line up your next job before you're finishing your current job? Because at the end of the day, you've got to live. But the fact is, Christopher Pyne is on $200,000 a year before he gets out of bed in the morning, right? Like, that's the size of this
I think
guy's
it's rather
pension.
obvious. Exactly. Can I just have a look,
And so
though?
that's why we have these rules.
Yeah, I do love, by the way, the footage that you're seeing right now, I'll let it loop a couple of times. You know, things just, you know, are the way they are in Canberra. But obviously, when you go and sit at a meeting, they put the little name tag in front of you so you can recognise the... But he's on the phone. Christopher Pyne still had his name put in front of the speaker when he's on the phone. I love it.
Well, I don't know why they didn't press the point. They could have made them attend in person. They didn't force them to. It's like they were kind of half in, half out on this. They couldn't decide whether they wanted them there or not.
I agree, and the people that were pushing this thing for that few weeks after the election, this was the biggest story in town for about 10 days. You would think that you would try at the very least to put the hammer down. Just briefly explain without, again, I don't want to bore people with process here because it's a bit of fun to get to, but can you be compelled to appear at something like this?
It'd be pretty unusual for that sort of hearing. The only way you can compel someone to attend is to literally subpoena them. And I have actually done that.
What does it say that they didn't turn up, though?
committee.
They're still on the taxpayer's dime for the rest of their life.
Well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be compelled to attend a committee hearing. But you do have to literally issue a subpoena.
Well,
and as I said, I actually have done it.
yeah. Please.
Can I ask you a question, Bronwyn?
Yeah.
Bronwyn, you were the former Speaker.
Yes.
Do you think, in a situation like this, with both Pyne and Bishop, who are members of the House of Representatives, that the House of Representatives could have exercised its rights of privilege over them as former members? I mean, there's a question about why were they being called before the Senate? They were never members of the Senate. The Senate's really investigating their activities as members of Parliament, isn't it?
Which is why it's not much of a committee. And no, it's not really a matter of privilege. You could have had a committee hearing or one of the committees of the lower house if you wanted to, but no, it's not a matter of privilege. And it's political grandstanding up in the Senate, but the Senate's pretty good at that.